Tyrese Calloway was just 16 when a substitute teacher found something scrawled on the back of his detention slip. An equation so advanced, she thought it was stolen. Within days he was pulled from class, branded a cheat, and barred from the academic team, without a single line of code being reviewed. But Tyrese didn't stop building, he built in silence. What he unleashed next would force judges, tech giants, and even the US president to take notice. But before that, he had to survive the sabotage. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The hallways of Maple Ridge High creaked with every step, as if the building itself groaned under the weight of its neglect. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their hum competing with the occasional slamming locker or the distant voice of a teacher too tired to yell. Mold crept in the corners of classroom ceilings. Textbooks were dog-eared, taped up, and missing pages that had long since disappeared in a decade of hand-me-down learning. In the far corner of room 214, a kid most people didn't look twice at sat quietly, hunched over a cafeteria tray, not because he was eating, but because he'd found it was the only smooth surface in the whole room that didn't wobble. Tyrese Calloway, 16, dark-skinned and bone-thin, had eyes that tracked numbers like a hawk tracks prey, silent, focused, and exact. He wrote with the urgency of someone trying to outrun the noise of the world around him. While the rest of the class filled in basic algebra problems on a worksheet, Tyrese scribbled something different. His pencil danced across a crumpled napkin, numbers folding into symbols, equations layering themselves into a system that looked more like architecture than math. It wasn't homework. It wasn't for anyone. It was a logic structure for a new kind of tool, something he hadn't yet built but could already see in his mind. He'd started working on it a month ago, after realizing how inefficient school calculators were at handling layered functions. What he envisioned was more than a calculator. It would predict problem types, suggest correction paths, and even give real-world applications. He wasn't sure what to call it yet, but it was his, built line by line from borrowed library code and late-night thoughts when sleep wouldn't come. Miss Cartwright, the geometry teacher who doubled as the volleyball coach, didn't bother walking the rows today. She trusted that whoever wasn't working would eventually be caught in a detention sweep. "You only hurt yourselves," she said vaguely, eyes on her phone. Tyrese didn't mind. He liked being invisible. It gave him room to breathe. At lunch he sat at his usual spot, near the vending machines. Not because he liked them, but because it was where the bullies never walked. While others swapped stories and TikToks, Tyrese opened his school-issued Chromebook. Its hinge was broken, so he had to prop the screen up against his backpack. He launched his private terminal, hidden behind a fake HTML page that mimicked school login screens, and typed in lines of code. He was close now. The prototype was calculating second-order derivatives automatically, even from vague phrasing. With a few tweaks he could have it learn from its own errors. Machine learning. Except Tyrese hadn't learned that term yet. He just knew how to make things work. "Yo, Calloway," someone jeered from a few tables over. "Why you always look like you solving NASA problems, huh?" He didn't look up. He'd learned that attention, any kind, always came with a price. "Must be trying to be white," another voice added, this time laced with laughter. Tyrese's hands tightened around the keyboard, not because the words hurt, they didn't anymore, but because they reminded him how fragile brilliance could be when housed in a body that society didn't expect it from. Later that week, a fight broke out in gym class. Tyrese wasn't involved, but when Coach Jefferson rounded everyone up, he didn't care about bystanders. "If you were there, you're in detention," he barked. No one argued. They'd learned it only made it worse. In the detention room, which used to be the library, until budget cuts turned it into a holding cell for the difficult, Tyrese found a dusty desk and sat alone. The proctor wasn't a regular teacher, just a substitute. Delaney, older, sharp-eyed, and unfamiliar with the school's usual apathy. She handed out slips of paper for students to sign in. Tyrese flipped his over and began working. Not on math homework, but again on his equations, refining the predictive element of his tool's algorithm. He didn't notice Miss Delaney walking past until she stopped beside him. Her eyes narrowed. "What's that?" Tyrese froze. Most teachers ignored his scribbles, dismissing them as doodles or distractions. But Miss Delaney wasn't like most. She picked up the paper gently. Are you running regressions?" she asked, her voice shifting from suspicion to surprise. Tyrese swallowed, unsure whether to lie or explain. It's just something I'm working on. You did this in detention? On the back of a slip? She asked, flipping it over. He nodded. Silence stretched between them. Ms. Delaney looked at him. Really looked. Like no one at Maple Ridge had before. Where did you learn this? He hesitated. I taught myself. Online. She didn't respond. Just stood there, eyes still scanning the formulas. Finally she said, Tyrese, do you know what you've written here? I think so. He said quietly. It's part of a tool I'm building. Like a math engine. Ms. Delaney stared a moment longer, then slowly folded the slip and tucked it into her jacket pocket. Why'd you take that? Tyrese asked, confused. She gave him a look he didn't understand yet. Part concern, part calculation. Because someone needs to see this. He didn't know it then, but that moment, a folded paper, a substitute teacher, and a formula born in silence, would become the start of a journey that would lift him into national headlines and drag him through some of the ugliest corners of the American education system. That night, Ms. Delaney sends a scanned copy of Tyrese's formula to a friend at the state education board and copies the principal without telling him. The following week dragged like wet concrete. Tyrese Calloway moved through the halls of Maple Ridge High with a heaviness he couldn't shake. Not because of guilt, but because of how quickly admiration turned into accusation. He watched from the corner of his eye as students pointed at him during lunch. A few even mimicked typing furiously into the air, mocking his focus. One whispered, "He's the hacker kid, right?" Another added, "He's lucky he ain't in juvie." It didn't matter that Tyrese had built something groundbreaking. It didn't matter that New EM3RA was his creation from scratch. Line by line, thought by thought, pain by pain. What mattered to the school was that someone like him had dared to outshine their system, and that system was quick to remind him of his place. 2 days after the laptop was taken, Tyrese and his mother, Letitia Calloway, were summoned to the principal's office. She had to miss work, unpaid, from her second shift at the laundry plant, just to make it. They sat stiffly across from Principal Halbridge, who folded his hands like he was preparing to deliver a funeral announcement. "We've reviewed the material your son submitted," he began slowly, "and we're deeply concerned." Letitia leaned forward. Concerned? About what? Halbridge nodded to Mr. Hanley, who pulled out a file, Tyrese's code, printed in grayscale, annotated with highlighter marks. "This level of programming," Hanley said, "is not typical of high schoolers. It uses logic trees, self-correcting loops, even rudimentary AI modeling. Frankly, we believe it was copied." Tyrese's jaw clenched. "It wasn't." Letitia's voice rose. "So you're saying my son stole something? Is that what this is?" "We're saying," Halbridge interjected smoothly, "that it's highly unlikely a student from this environment, with limited access and no formal mentorship, could have produced something this advanced without outside help." There it was. This environment. It clung to the walls like mildew. The assumption that poverty and brilliance couldn't coexist. Tyrese's chest burned. "I built Numa 3R by myself. Every line of code. I don't need your permission to be smart." Halbridge didn't flinch. "Even if that's true," he said, "you violated school policy, using unregistered software on school Wi-Fi, bypassing firewall protections, accessing third-party databases." Hanley added, "This could be considered academic misconduct. A suspension is on the table." Letitia stared in disbelief. "You're threatening to suspend my son for building something too smart?" Neither man answered. The silence was an answer in itself. To avoid escalation, Halbridge offered a compromise. Tyrese wouldn't be suspended if he agreed to sign a waiver banning him from any school-sponsored academic events for the remainder of the year. No science fair, no academic bowl, nothing that would make headlines. "Why?" Letitia demanded. "You afraid he'll win?" "We're protecting the integrity of our institution," Halbridge said. "No," Tyrese murmured. "You're protecting your comfort." Letitia squeezed her son's hand beneath the desk, her eyes brimming. "Don't you sign anything," she said. But Tyrese already knew. The damage was done. He wouldn't be allowed back into the academic bowl team. The one thing that used to give him quiet joy. He'd been practicing for it since freshman year. That space where math problems felt like puzzles, and not punishment gone. The waiver stayed unsigned, but Tyrese was removed from the team anyway. No explanation was given to the student body. No announcement. Just an empty seat where he used to sit, replaced by a C-average student whose only qualification was team fit. Tyrese tried to stay strong, but even his mother could see the light dimming in his eyes. At home, he barely touched his food. Numb 3R as progress stalled. His thoughts turned bitter, looping through all the ways the system had tried to box him in. At school, teachers avoided eye contact. Ms. Cartwright even walked past him without the usual forced smile. He was radioactive now, brilliant but untouchable. No one wanted to be associated with the student who'd embarrassed the district by being too exceptional. That Friday, something strange happened. During last period, Tyrese was called into the guidance office. Expecting another lecture, he entered with his guard up, but instead of judgment, he found the office empty, just a single sheet of paper on the desk with a note scribbled across the top. "You're not crazy. They're just scared of you." Beneath it was a printed flyer. Kentucky State Math Championship, registration now open. He stared at the flyer like it was a mirage. The event wasn't school-sponsored. It was open to individuals. Anyone could compete. No backing required. Just proof of identity and a project or tool related to mathematics or computation. The location? Lexington Convention Center, 2 hours away. The date? 1 month from today. The prize? A $10,000 scholarship, plus statewide recognition. Tyrese blinked, stunned. No signature, no name. Just opportunity slid quietly under the door. He folded the paper, heart racing. Something in his chest stirred. Not just hope, but resolve. Maybe the school could ignore him. Maybe they could label him a cheat. But they couldn't erase him. Numon 3RA was still his. The code still lived. Backed up on encrypted drives he'd hidden in his closet. He could rebuild it. Better. Smarter. Louder. That night, he dug out the old laptop again. Reinstalled the interface. Started rewriting from scratch. Not because he had to, but because this time he wanted to be undeniable. And as he coded, he replayed every insult, every sneer, every backhanded compliment, every time someone looked at him like he didn't belong. He turned those moments into logic strings and error fixes, wrapped them into syntax like armor. His mother walked in at midnight, surprised to see him awake. "You're building again?" she asked softly. He nodded without looking up. "They want me quiet, Ma, but I'm gonna be so loud they can't ignore me." Letitia walked over, kissed the top of his head. "Then make him listen, baby." Over the next few days, Tyrese's energy changed. He wasn't just working, he was reclaiming. He rebuilt New M3RA into a sleeker model, designed for competition. He added real-time explanation functions, voice response calculations, and a user-friendly dashboard. And as his engine grew smarter, so did his instincts. Something about that anonymous flyer didn't sit right. Who had sent it? A teacher? A janitor? Someone watching from the shadows, rooting for him? Or maybe it wasn't kindness. Maybe it was bait. But Tyrese didn't care. Let them watch. 3 days before the competition deadline, Tyrese receives an official warning email from the district. Unauthorized participation in external academic events may violate student conduct agreements. Proceeding without clearance could result in disciplinary action. But there was one problem. Tyrese never told anyone he was entering. Tyrese stared at the warning email until the words blurred. Unauthorized participation in external academic events may violate student conduct agreements. The message was cold, vague, deliberately so. No sender name, just district compliance office. No one at school had asked him about the state math championship. He hadn't posted online, hadn't told a single teacher. He'd even used the public library computer to submit his registration. So how did they know? He forwarded the email to himself, printed a copy, and slipped it into his backpack without a word. In his gut, he already understood the truth. Someone was watching him. Not to help, not to uplift, but to contain. The rules for the Kentucky State Math Championship were clear. Every participant under 18 needed a faculty sponsor, not to coach, just to verify eligibility. Normally this meant a math teacher would sign a simple form confirming the student was in good standing. But after what had happened with Newman 3R, no one at Maple Ridge High wanted their name next to Tyrese Calloway's. He tried Miss Cartwright first, out of obligation. She declined before he finished his sentence. "I don't want to be associated with controversy," she said, eyes on her desk. "You understand?" He didn't. Not really. Next he asked Mr. Hanley, who scoffed. "This isn't a tech showcase, it's math. Stick to the basics, Calloway." Finally he went to Principal Halbridge directly, standing in the doorway of his office, as students filtered out for lunch. I need a sponsor, Tyrese said. You know I qualify. I already registered. Helbridge sighed as though asked to co-sign on a crime. Even if I wanted to help, which I don't, I'm afraid our hands are tied. Given your disciplinary history, we can't have you representing the school. Disciplinary history. A phrase manufactured out of thin air. Tyrese had never been suspended, never even skipped class. But now the record read like a warning label. Unauthorized tech use. Disruptive coding behavior. Unconfirmed plagiarism. They'd turned his genius into guilt. Back at home, Tyrese sat in silence. The form remained unsigned. The registration deadline was 5 days away. Without a sponsor, he'd be disqualified before he even arrived. Letitia noticed the look on his face and asked softly, "You okay, baby?" He shook his head. "No one'll sign. Not a single one of them." She didn't offer a pep talk. She didn't tell him to keep trying. She simply nodded, pulled her phone from her purse and typed in a name. "Call Ms. Park." Tyrese paused. "Miss Park? From church?" Letitia nodded. She used to teach math before she retired. Still tutors some kids on weekends. She don't scare easy either. "You must be Letitia's boy," she said without looking up. "Come in. Close the door. You track dirt. I make you mop." Tyrese obeyed. The room smelled like chalk dust and black coffee. He pulled the flyer from his backpack and slid it across the table. "I need a sponsor." "Yes, ma'am. It's an AI math engine. I call it Num3RA." Her eyebrow raised. "Just slightly. I've been working on it for months," he continued. "My school won't support me. They think it's too advanced." Said I probably copied it. Miss Park set down her pen. "I taught calculus for 30 years. Seen 3 kids go to MIT, 2 to Stanford. You think I haven't seen this before?" "Seen what?" "That look, that talent, that fear." She tapped her temple. "It's not your tool they're scared of. It's what it means if someone like you made it." She pulled the form toward her and signed her name in clean, deliberate letters. "I'll sponsor you, but you need to understand something, Tyrese. The system don't fight fair. You get attention, they'll try harder to take it away. They don't want black brilliance. They want black silence." Tyrese swallowed hard. "I'm not scared." Ms. Park met his gaze. "Then make sure your code isn't the only thing sharp on competition day." That night, with his form finally signed and scanned, Tyrese resubmitted his registration. The confirmation email landed instantly. "Welcome to the 2025 Kentucky State Math Championship. Your tool will be reviewed upon arrival." It felt real now. The next morning, his mood was lighter. Even Letitia noticed him humming as he buttered toast, something he hadn't done in months. But by the time she returned from work that evening, the mood was shattered. Sitting on the kitchen table was an envelope. No return address. Official looking. Government sealed. Letitia opened it, eyes scanning the contents. Her face went pale. "Tyrese," she called, voice trembling. "Come here." He entered slowly, wiping his hands on a dish towel. She handed him the letter. "Department of Urban Housing and Assistance. Notice of review. Your current housing subsidy may be subject to re-evaluation due to participation in unauthorized or unapproved extracurricular activities that violate local district agreements. Continued violations could affect eligibility and result in loss of benefits." Tyrese read the lines twice. Then again, it didn't make sense. How could competing in a math competition threaten their home? Letitia sat down slowly. "They're not warning you, Ty. They're warning me." His voice cracked. "But this ain't even through the school." "It doesn't matter. They're sending a message." Tyrese clenched his fists, heart pounding. "You want me to drop out? Cancel it?" Letitia looked at him, eyes soft but firm. "No. I want you to win." He blinked. "But what if—" "Baby," she interrupted. "They already trying to take things from us. You give up now. They'll know they can do it anytime they want. That's how they keep folks like us quiet. They pick at your joy until you start silencing yourself." Tyrese nodded slowly. The pain was deep, but the fire in his chest burned deeper. He wouldn't fold. He couldn't. He walked back to his room, sat at his desk, and opened Num3RA one last time before the competition. His tool was ready. The question was the next morning, Tyrese receives a phone call from an unknown number. When he answers, a voice whispers, "They cloned your tool. If you show up in Lexington, they'll say you stole it." 3 days before the Kentucky State Math Championship, Tyrese Calloway's world imploded. Not in a loud public spectacle, but in the slow, merciless crawl of digital fire. It started with a message from a friend of a friend. "Yo bro, you seen Reddit? You trending lol." Confused, Tyrese clicked the link. His stomach twisted. There it was, his photo, cropped from a school yearbook, slightly pixelated, posted on a subreddit with 3.2 million members.
This kid says he built an AI math tool. Real question is, did he build it or just steal it?
The top comment? "No way this is real. Kid looks like he's never even seen a command line." Another. "He's 16 and black? Come on. This is a PR stunt. Or a setup. Probably just fronting for some adults behind the scenes." The post exploded overnight. It climbed to the front page by morning. Screenshots spread across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Influencers with millions of followers started chiming in. A YouTube tech pundit called it suspicious. A podcast host joked, "I've never seen a math prodigy with Jordans." Tyrese's DMs turned into a nightmare. "Lol, you seriously think people will believe this isn't stolen? Bet your mom wrote the code. Get ready to be exposed, you fraud." Affirmative action genius, huh? The algorithm didn't care about truth. It cared about engagement. And outrage was the most viral currency. Tyrese sat on his bed, phone in hand, as wave after wave of strangers dissected his existence. His picture, his voice, even his old Instagram captions, all up for interpretation, judgment, ridicule. The damage wasn't just online. At school, students walked past him with exaggerated slow claps. Someone printed out a screenshot of the Reddit post and taped it to his locker. Someone else drew a fake headline underneath. "Math fraud, Louisville teen uses stolen software to enter competition." Teachers didn't say a word. Not one. Not even Miss Cartwright, who used to give him forced smiles at least. The administration said they were looking into it, which really meant doing nothing. Even the school district sent a passive-aggressive tweet. "We encourage innovation, but all entries in academic events must be verified and original. Integrity matters." Tyrese's name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't have to be. Everyone knew. He felt like the whole world was screaming, "You don't belong." At home, Letitia tried to shield him. She unplugged the Wi-Fi, hid the mail, but Tyrese wasn't a child anymore. He knew enough to find a signal, to scroll in silence, to watch the world rip apart everything he built with hands that still smelled like soldered wires and keyboard dust. His chest ached, like it had been hollowed out. He didn't eat for almost a full day, just lay there staring at the cracked ceiling of their two-bedroom apartment. It was like every moment of his life had been preparing him for rejection. But nothing prepared him for this. When Ms. Park showed up at their door that evening, Letitia let her in without a word. She found Tyrese curled on the couch, hoodie pulled low. "Get up," she said gently. He didn't move. "I said," she repeated, firmer this time. "Get up." Tyrese stirred but kept his head down. "What's the point? They already decided. I'm a joke now." Miss Park pulled up a chair and sat opposite him. "Then prove them wrong." He shook his head. "It won't matter. They don't care if it's real. They just don't want it coming from someone like me." "Exactly," she said. "Which is why you show up anyway. And you don't say a word. You let Numum 3RA speak for you." His lip trembled. "They cloned my tool. Said if I show up, they'll claim I stole it. Then build it again," she said. "Faster, sharper, smarter." He looked up, eyes rimmed red. "Why? So they can still strip it from me. Because history forgets who mocked first," she whispered. "But it never forgets who proved them wrong." The next morning, Tyrese got to work like a machine. He rebuilt Numum 3R's interface, installed an entirely new skin, added a verbal AI component. It now not only solved problems, it explained them in real time. It used a voice that matched his own tone, reading aloud calculations, like an academic assistant. He uploaded every step of the redesign to a private time-stamped repository, proof of authorship, then backed it up to 3 drives, one with Miss Park, one on an encrypted USB, and one mailed to himself, unopened, a sealed time-stamped package, a quiet weapon against false claims. Still, the noise didn't stop. Videos circulated showing Tyrese's old Instagram photos, cropped, captioned, twisted. "Does this look like a genius to you?" one tweet said, showing him smiling in front of a worn-down basketball court. Even black voices joined the criticism. "He's not what black excellence looks like," one TikTok creator said. "This feels fake, manufactured. Be real, y'all." Those words cut deeper than the racism, deeper than the trolls, because they came from people who should have known better, should have known the stakes. But Miss Park reminded him, being first never means being loved. It means being targeted, until they can't deny you anymore. Letitia taped a message to the fridge. Don't let them shrink you. Tyrese wrote code until his fingers cramped. Practiced until his tool could answer question trees in under 3 seconds. He ran simulation after simulation, timing responses, stress testing its functions. He didn't sleep much, but he felt alive. Then the night before they were set to leave for Lexington, a new message arrived. Not on Reddit, not on Instagram. A direct message sent to his encrypted email. The one he used only for Numan 3R. We know what you're up to. Don't show up. Attached was a screenshot of his private project folder. Someone had accessed it from an IP address within the school district server. The subject line chilled him. Stop before you regret it. Tyrese opens the screenshot's metadata and sees a chilling detail. The file was accessed using his principal's district credentials. The Lexington Convention Center loomed like a modern fortress of intellect. All glass and steel, its atrium buzzing with energy. Banners for the Kentucky State Math Championship hung overhead in bold serif font, fluttering slightly as the crowd moved beneath them. Tyrese Calloway stepped through the doors in a faded hoodie, second-hand jeans, and sneakers whose soles whispered of every mile he'd walked in silence. The drawstring of his backpack swung as he adjusted the strap, clutching the only thing he had, a black USB drive tucked into a felt pouch, holding the latest version of Neo N3. Everywhere he looked, he saw money. Polo shirts stitched with private school emblems. Students wheeling travel cases, filled with high-end laptops. Matching jackets. Coaches barking warm-up instructions. Some competitors had entire support teams. Stylists, photographers, even PR interns filming for social media. Tyrese didn't even have a printed name badge. His had been handwritten in permanent marker. Tyrese by a volunteer who glanced at his application and said flatly, "Guess you're one of the independents." He didn't respond. He just kept walking, ignoring the sideways glances, the not-so-subtle whispers. Who let public school in here? He doesn't even have a sponsor pass. Look, he's alone. Didn't he get exposed online? Tyrese tuned them out. At check-in, he was directed to Bracket 4, Advanced Open Division. It was the most difficult round. No calculators, no outside help, no room for error. The list of competitors included the state's most prestigious STEM academies and private institutions, with full robotics labs. It was supposed to be for experienced teams with institutional support. And somehow, mysteriously, that's where Tyrese had been placed. Should have been bracketed with the general solo competitors, Miss Park muttered, reviewing the sheet. They set you up. Tyrese just nodded. Then I'll play anyway. The ballroom was transformed into a math arena. Rows of long tables, each outfitted with an isolated computer terminal and a judge. Massive projection screens displayed real-time progress. Cameras hovered overhead, capturing angles for the live stream. Tyrese found his seat. He noticed the other students unpacking tablets, styluses, algorithm notepads, noise-canceling headphones. He placed his USB drive on the table. The judge beside him, a white man with neatly parted hair and a subtle frown, eyed the drive skeptically. You'll be using external software? He asked. Yes, Tyrese said calmly. Num3R. It's my own tool. I've submitted the specs in advance. It's cleared. The judge looked unimpressed. Right. Tyrese logged in, plugged the USB into the terminal, and launched the program. The dashboard flickered to life. Sleek, minimalist, coded entirely by him. A soft voice greeted him. Welcome back, Tyrese. Ready to dominate? He smirked. Quietly. The moderator announced the rules. Each problem set would increase in difficulty. Scoring was based not just on speed, but accuracy and methodology. Answers weren't enough. Competitors had to show logic flow. The clock started. Tyrese leaned forward. Num3R went to work. The first problem flashed, a recursive function problem with dual variable input. Tyrese whispered into the mic, process and solve. NumE3RA displayed the answer in 0.73 seconds, complete with a clean step-by-step breakdown. The judge raised an eyebrow, glanced at his screen. Second question, a matrix inversion, with missing elements. Predict gap. Infer pattern. Solve, Tyrese murmured. Num3RA. Solved it in under a second. On the overhead screen, his progress bar jumped to the lead. Whispers rippled through the room. Heads turned. By question 5, Tyrese was solving problems faster than any other team. Not just individual. Competitors were still scribbling scratch work, while Nomium 3RI had already processed the answer, double-checked its logic tree, and printed verification. By question 10, the live stream chat exploded. Who is this kid? Yo, look at bracket 4, seat 17. He's cooking. Is this real time? This is insane. He built that software. Some spectators started crowding near the back. Even a few students from other brackets glanced over, stunned by how fast Tyrese's terminal screen kept changing. The judge beside him, silent until now, began shifting uncomfortably. By problem 14, Tyrese broke a record. The moderator announced it live. Seat 17, Tyrese Calloway, has just set a new bracket speed benchmark. A pause. Then the judge beside him raised a hand. Pause the match, he said flatly. The room stilled. Tyrese blinked. What? Pause the match. The judge repeated louder. A moderator approached. A quiet conversation followed. Then a voice came over the intercom. All participants, please pause your activity. We are reviewing a potential issue with software validation in bracket 4. Gasps. Murmurs. A few people even clapped, not out of support but relief. Relief that the anomaly, the uninvited guest, the underdog who wasn't supposed to be winning, might be disqualified. Tyrese stood. The judge leaned close. You need to come with me. Your software is being investigated. Tyrese's voice was even. I submitted the files 2 weeks ago. You approved it. There's been a complaint, the judge said. We're checking for code origin and plagiarism. Of course there was a complaint. Of course now, at the moment, he was proving them all wrong. Someone decided it was too much. As they led him to a side room, Tyrese locked eyes with Miss Park. She stood near the back of the hall, arms crossed, expression hard as stone. She mouthed one word. Breathe. In the interrogation room. White walls, single table. Tyrese sat across from 3 judges and 1 tournament official. On the screen was new M3RA's code, broken into blocks. One judge tapped the screen. This module, neural pattern matching. Where did you get this? I wrote it. You're 16. I wrote it. The official scrolled through. In this error analysis engine, this is college-level machine learning. I taught myself. Do you have proof? Yes. Tyrese reached into his backpack and produced a sealed envelope. Postmarked to myself 2 weeks ago. Code logs. Timestamps. Authorship trail. Open it. They opened it. Inside were screenshots, diagrams, and a notarized signature Miss Park had helped him get at the local bank. The room was quiet. Still, one judge leaned forward. We're not saying you didn't write it, he said, but we're not sure this level of sophistication aligns with fair competition. Tyrese frowned. You mean you didn't expect it from me? Silence again. Look, one judge said finally, we need to do a full code review. If everything checks out, you'll be reinstated. But for now, you're disqualified. Temporarily. The door opened. Miss Park walked in. She looked at the officials, then at Tyrese. Don't worry, she said quietly. Let them check. You built something they've never seen before. That's why they're scared. Tyrese exhaled slowly. His heart was racing, but his mind was clear. They weren't trying to verify code. They were trying to bury it. As Tyrese waits in the holding room, a volunteer slips him a note. It reads, one of the judges works for the company that tried to buy your software. Tyrese sat in the holding room, with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, clutching the anonymous note like it was on fire. One of the judges works for the company that tried to buy your software. The same company that offered him $1 million in exchange for silence. The same one that sent lawyers when he refused to sell. Now one of their people sat in judgment, holding power over whether he could compete or be erased. Miss Park reread the note, her eyes narrowing. They didn't come here to judge a competition, she said. They came to bury the competition. Before Tyrese could respond, the door opened. A tournament official stood there, stiff and practiced. The judges have a few more questions. You'll be addressing the panel during the public break period. Tyrese blinked. Public? They've decided to open the review session. Transparency, the official replied without a hint of irony. Miss Park touched Tyrese's shoulder as he stood. Let them hear your code. Not just your voice. The ballroom looked different now. The tables had been cleared, and rows of chairs faced a small stage set up in front of the projector screen. It wasn't just the remaining competitors watching. Parents, coaches, and spectators now filled the room. Phones were out. Live streams running. Tyrese walked up under the hot white lights. Alone. At the judges' table sat 5 people, each with printouts, tablets, and screens open. But all Tyrese could see was the man in the center. Judge Rayner, face cold, jaw tight. The name matched a LinkedIn profile Miss Park had just found. Senior Tech Strategist, Neurobit Systems Inc., the same company that had tried to buy new M3RA. Conflict of interest. Masked as integrity. The moderator stepped forward. Due to allegations of impropriety regarding submitted technology, the panel will now hear a technical breakdown of the tool in question. Tyrese nodded, hands sweaty, heart pounding. The questions began. Did you write every line of NUM3RA's source code yourself? Yes. What IDE did you use? Vim. On Ubuntu. Where did you learn neural tree architecture? Through MIT's OpenCourseware and trial and error. Can you explain the regression logic that underpins your prediction module? Yes. They didn't stop. Each question was deeper, faster, designed to trip him. Judge Rayner leaned forward, voice calm but condescending. You expect us to believe a 16-year-old, from an underperforming district, with no formal mentorship, developed proprietary-grade AI in his bedroom? Tyrese's eyes didn't flinch. Yes. A loud scoff erupted from the left side of the room. It came from a man in a gray blazer, Coach Donnelly from East Bridge Academy, a prep school with 3 teams in the finals. Come on, he said, standing up. This is ridiculous. He's a black kid with a calculator and a flashy UI. You're gonna let this stunt take the spotlight from real students? The room murmured. Miss Park stood from the crowd. Say that again. Donnelly ignored her. He couldn't have made that. This is all theater. Tyrese didn't speak. He didn't need to. The moderator stepped in. Mr. Calloway, we're granting you 30 minutes. Show us the code. Prove it's yours. The projector clicked on. Tyrese's terminal screen appeared overhead. He plugged in his USB. The room dimmed. His hands trembled slightly as he launched the root directory. Line after line of source code appeared. White text on black. Thousands of lines that pulsed like a second language. He began at the top. This is NEM3RA's input parser. It handles natural language prompts and converts them into executable logic nodes, he said. I wrote this over 6 weeks. You can see the timestamps. Click. This section is the error correction tree. If a user enters an incomplete equation, NEM3RA guesses intent based on historical entries and user behavior. It learns. Click. This is the recursive prediction engine. It doesn't just solve, it anticipates. That's why it's fast. Click. This is a custom sorting function I built because Python's default kept lagging. Every function, every method, every module, Tyrese described from memory. He spoke clearly, calmly, as though reciting parts of himself. Because that's exactly what this was. NEM3RA wasn't just software. It was stitched from his isolation, compiled from his rage, debugged through rejection. As he scrolled, the room fell completely silent. Not in awe, but disbelief. The kind that clings to people who are watching their assumptions dissolve in real time. Some competitors looked ashamed. Others just stared. Judge Rayner said nothing. His pen stopped moving. When Tyrese finished, he turned and said, "There's a backup of this code postmarked 2 weeks ago. Signed, sealed, notarized. You already have it." One of the junior judges glanced at the folder, then at Rayner. A beat passed. Then another. Then the silence snapped. A woman at the judges' table stood. She was older, with silver-streaked hair and a firm voice. Her nameplate read Dr. Elise Monroe. "This is enough," she said, standing. "We have confirmation of authorship. This student belongs here." But Rayner didn't agree. He slammed his tablet closed. "If he's allowed to stay, I'm out." Gasps scattered through the audience. Dr. Monroe raised her chin. "Then you're free to leave." Rayner stood, jaw clenched. "You're making a mistake." "No," she said. "You already did." He stormed off the stage, muttering something under his breath. Phones followed him. Cameras caught every step. Tyrese stood frozen. Not in victory, but in disbelief. He hadn't expected that. Not this soon. Not this loud. The moderator turned back to the mic. After review, Tyrese Calloway is reinstated into the competition. The crowd erupted. Some clapped. Others just stared in stunned silence. Miss Park exhaled. But Tyrese's mind wasn't celebrating. It was spinning. Raynor was gone. But what had he really come to do? As Tyrese steps off stage, a volunteer slips him another note. This one's simpler but far more terrifying. They still have your old code, and they're going to publish it before the finals. Tyrese stood at the edge of the stage, the note trembling in his pocket. They still have your old code, and they're going to publish it before the finals. The ink wasn't smudged, the message clear, and if the timing was right, it meant that even with the judges reversed, even with Raynor storming out, someone still wanted him out of this room before the final round. He inhaled slowly, anchoring himself. The ballroom was filling again. Cameras returned. Live stream counters ticked back up. Spectators leaned forward. A few of the other students, kids who once scoffed, now watched him differently. With less smirk, more interest. Dr. Monroe approached him backstage. You need to finish what you started. Give them what Raynor didn't want them to see. Tyrese nodded. I need a projector. And 10 minutes. They gave him 15. He walked back onto the stage, not as a defendant this time, but as a presenter, a builder, the first black solo competitor ever to take center stage at the Kentucky State Math Championship with his own original AI tool. The screen behind him glowed white. He clicked his USB. The first slide appeared, a napkin sketch, dated in blue ink, faintly coffee-stained. This was the start, Tyrese said, voice steady. February 14th. Detention. I didn't even have paper. The crowd chuckled gently. Slide 2, raw code on a dusty laptop. Slide 3, error messages, and broken logic trees. I didn't get it right for weeks. My tool couldn't understand user intent. Then I figured out how to cross-reference user syntax with common learning patterns from my school's outdated practice tests. Slide 4. The first successful run. The room's lights dimmed further. He launched the live interface of Numio 3. This is the current version. It doesn't just solve, it interprets. It doesn't just compute, it teaches. Because where I come from, you don't always have someone to explain the why. So I made something that he fed in a malformed algebraic equation. Num3ra corrected it, showed the logic path, and explained in Tyrese's own recorded voice why the mistake was common, and how to avoid it. Murmurs turned into something deeper. He pulled up the module logs, displayed timestamps, version histories, commit notes from sleepless nights. If you think I stole this, he said, turning to the judges, then I'd like to see the thief who also documents every bug fix and improvement like this. A few judges leaned forward. Tyrese took the risk. He scrolled all the way to the bottom. And here, he said, is the line of code that Raynor tried to buy 6 months ago. Gasps. Several phones caught that moment. He wanted exclusive rights, offered $1 million. But I said no, because I didn't build this to sell. I built it because nobody was going to hand me a future. So I wrote one instead. The room went silent. Even the competitors, kids in polished uniforms, backed by legacy schools, looked stunned. Not out of pity, out of realization. This wasn't a story of charity or fluke. It was design. Tireless, brilliant design. Miss Park stood at the back, arms crossed, nodding quietly. She'd seen it coming. But now so had everyone else. As Tyrese closed the presentation, the crowd erupted. Loud applause. Not forced. Not polite. Genuine. Dozens stood. Some even whistled. The judges huddled briefly. Then the moderator returned to the mic. We are reinstating Tyrese Calloway. Effective immediately. He will compete in the final round. Tyrese exhaled. He'd done it. Not just survived the system, but made it bend, however briefly. He returned to his seat. Students leaned over to fist bump him. Even a few coaches gave subtle nods of respect. Mrs. Park walked past and squeezed his shoulder. You cracked it wide open, she whispered. He smiled. Almost the kind of smile that's more release than joy. Then the screen at the front of the room shifted. The leaderboard began updating. Scores, names, ranks. His heart sped up as he watched his name climb. 7th, 5th, then suddenly, it disappeared. Gone. His row vanished entirely. He blinked, thinking it was a glitch. But then the crowd started murmuring. Wait, where'd he go? Refresh the screen. Did they pull him again? A voice came through the loudspeaker. Not the moderator. Not a judge. A different tone. Cold. Measured. Due to a violation of competition integrity rules. Contestant Tyrese Calloway has been disqualified. Decision is final. The room froze. Tyrese stood up. What violation? No answer. The crowd looked around. Miss Park marched to the judge's table. What the hell is going on? A tournament official stepped forward, clipboard in hand, eyes unreadable. We received a new submission, a document containing code from Mr. Calloway, dated prior to this event. The code appears to match that of an older software used in a prior commercial attempt. Since that product was previously flagged for potential IP violations, we cannot verify Mr. Calloway's original authorship with confidence. Tyrese's mouth opened. I never sold that code. That was the version they tried to buy from me. I still own it. Ownership is not the issue. The official replied. Originality is. And based on this report, we have reason to believe your tool is derived from that product. Mrs. Park's voice sharpened. You mean the one he refused to sell? The one your former Judge Rayner tried to buy? The official didn't blink. We're not discussing Rayner. Maybe you should be, she snapped. Tyrese took a step forward. You already verified my code. I showed you every timestamp. You watched me explain it line by line. Another judge whispered into the official's ear. The official stepped back. I'm sorry, decision is final. Tyrese looked around at the judges who now stared at the table, at the students who just begun to believe, at the cameras still rolling. It wasn't just an injustice. It was the system reminding him, we decide who gets to win. He stood frozen, heartbeat thundering in his ears. This wasn't just sabotage. It was theft, cloaked in procedure. Then a sound. A chair scraped across the floor near the front row. Dr. Monroe stood again. Unacceptable, she said. This isn't a disqualification. This is revenge. The official turned red. We've made our ruling. Dr. Monroe raised a hand. Then I'm making mine. She pulled a badge from her coat. National Math Policy Council, Ethics Oversight Division. The room gasped. Effective immediately, I am halting this competition under emergency review. Gasps echoed through the convention ballroom, like thunder trapped in glass. Dr. Elise Monroe stood tall at center stage, her badge glinting under the overhead lights. The words National Math Policy Council, Ethics Oversight Division, commanded silence. She had taken control of the room with 5 words. I am halting this competition. The lead official froze. Dr. Monroe, he stammered. With respect, this is outside. This is entirely within my jurisdiction, she interrupted. The moment your panel disqualified a student without transparent procedural review, after reinstating him based on documented authorship, and while withholding evidence of a known conflict of interest, this competition entered federal scrutiny. The judges stiffened like children caught red-handed. But Tyrese didn't celebrate. Not yet. He stood off to the side, flanked by Miss Park, his fists clenched so tightly his nails left imprints in his palms. They weren't done trying to erase him. Miss Park turned to the moderator, voice razor sharp. I want to see the rule book, the full state competition charter. Right now. A volunteer hurried off stage. Tyrese reached for his phone, his fingers still trembling. I bookmarked something a while back, he said under his breath. What is it? Ms. Park asked. State Education Code. Title 17, Section 5-B. Found it after they threatened to ban me for using my own tool. He pulled it up. The screen displayed the text. No student shall be disqualified from a state-level academic competition for using original technology or methodologies, unless proven to have infringed on another participant's intellectual property or committed verified plagiarism. He turned the screen toward the nearest judge. Dr. Monroe took one look and nodded. That aligns with national guidelines. The head judge looked like he'd swallowed glass. Across the room, a man in a beige blazer stood and cleared his throat. If I may. His voice was calm, assertive. I'm Brian Lennox, legal consultant for the Southern STEM Outreach Foundation. He raised his hand, signaling that he wasn't asking for permission. I've reviewed that statute, Lennox said. It was written to protect precisely this kind of innovation. Unless this young man lifted proprietary code from a verified source, you're not just in violation of state law, you're flirting with a civil rights lawsuit. Ms. Park smirked. Dr. Monroe folded her arms. You'll deliberate. In private. 10 minutes. Then return with a ruling. A fair one. The judges huddled behind the curtains. Tyrese was left standing alone. The ballroom buzzed, but the noise was different now. Curious. Cautious. Watching. Then something happened Tyrese didn't expect. One by one, students began to approach him. First a boy from Westington Prep. Navy jacket. Clean cut. Hey, he said, That was really impressive. Can I ask how your tool recognizes input structure? Then a girl from Bishop Lewis Academy. I'm coding a math visualizer. Could you look at my architecture sometime? And then two kids from an underfunded district, hoodie-wearing twins from Hollow Creek Middle. Yo, can you teach us how to do what you did? Tyrese blinked. Me? They nodded. Your tool showed us something nobody in our school ever has. He looked around. There were more. A dozen kids. Then 24, all gathered in a quiet, growing circle. Not asking for a trophy. Not offering sympathy. Just seeking access. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about building what no classroom had ever handed them. Miss Park stepped back and watched with folded arms, her expression unreadable, but her eyes glistened. Tyrese had arrived at the competition to prove himself. But now he was doing something more powerful. Proving that brilliance wasn't a uniform. It wasn't a name tag or a sponsor. It was fire. And today, it had caught. Someone nearby whispered, "This moment is bigger than the finals." Tyrese heard it, and for the first time since the disqualification, he believed it. He grabbed a scrap of paper, jotted his contact email, one of the few they hadn't flagged, and handed it to every student who asked. "I'll send you the open source version of NUMU 3RA, he said. "It's stripped down but works." "You're sharing it?" someone asked. "It was never just mine," he said. "It was built in silence for people who never get heard." Cheers broke out again, small, but meaningful. Across the room, a woman in a black coat slipped quietly into the back row. No press badge, no gear, just a notebook. She sat alone, observed everything, especially Tyrese.
Miss Park caught her eye and recognized her instantly.
She leaned toward Tyrese. "You see that woman in the back?" He followed her gaze. "That's Harper Baines, senior correspondent, The Atlantic. She writes exposés on systemic bias in education." Tyrese's stomach flipped. "You're serious?"
Very.
He turned back toward the growing crowd of students, now asking to beta test INUM 3RA. The finals hadn't even started, and yet somehow he was already winning. Then the curtains parted. The judges walked back out, their faces locked into masks of forced neutrality. The moderator cleared his throat, eyes bouncing between the officials and the audience. After further deliberation, and in consultation with independent legal and ethics advisors, we have reviewed the submission of Tyrese Calloway and found no evidence of code theft or plagiarism. The prior disqualification has been reversed. Pause. Tyrese Calloway will compete in the final round. Applause thundered from the crowd. Students clapped. Spectators stood. Tyrese didn't move. Not at first. He just stood there, stunned, absorbing the moment. Then Miss Park nudged him gently. "Go finish what you started." As he walked back toward the main stage, Dr. Monroe caught his eye. "You didn't just defend your name," she said quietly. "You redefined what the future looks like." He smiled, but just as he stepped toward his seat, something made him stop. The main screen in the ballroom flashed again, but this time, not with scores. It was a browser window, an anonymous post. NUM 3RA leak, real code or publicity stunt. Attached a download link. Caption. The so-called original tool, now online. You decide. The timer beside the link showed it had been posted 1 minute ago. Tyrese's jaw tightened. Whoever had cloned his original version had just gone live. Harper Baines lifted her phone, eyes locked on the screen. She whispered to her editor, "We've got something bigger than a math story. This is systemic sabotage, and I'm staying until the last round." Tyrese didn't respond. He rarely did. He knew better. Words thrown at him weren't for answers. They were warnings. Don't rise too fast. Don't be different. Don't be smarter than the system built to ignore you. The real sting came during fourth period math. Miss Cartwright held up a copy of the napkin, somehow printed, and waved it like it was evidence in a crime. "Someone apparently thinks they're a math prodigy," she said to the class with mock enthusiasm. "But this isn't even real work. Just looks like scribbles to me." Tyrese looked down, face blank. The napkin he'd poured hours into, his blueprint for something revolutionary, had become a punchline, a joke, and Miss Cartwright, who never even read past basic grading rubrics, hadn't bothered to ask a single question. Not even what if. That night, Tyrese didn't cry. He'd done that enough times already. What he did instead was dig through the closet in his mother's bedroom. He found what he was looking for, an old laptop, dusty and slow. used once upon a time by his uncle to DJ weddings before life caught up with him. The screen was cracked in the corner, the trackpad barely worked, and one key, E, was missing entirely. But to Tyrese, it was enough. He pulled out the schematics he'd redrawn, spread out his napkins and scraps of notes, and began building in silence. His fingers flew across the keyboard, punching commands into a terminal window. He connected it to the school library's Wi-Fi using a spoofed MAC address. He'd figured out how to bypass their filters months ago. By midnight, he had a crude shell of a learning engine. It couldn't answer much yet, but it could ask, and that, to Tyrese, meant everything. Over the next few weeks, he scavenged parts. The broken desktop dumped near the gym. He took the RAM, a USB stick found near the faculty lounge, reformatted it. In a junkyard 3 miles away, he found a broken Raspberry Pi board, water-damaged but usable. He dried it with rice and hope. He called the tool num3ra, like number, but with defiance stitched into every letter. Each night after school, after finishing whatever bare minimum homework he had to turn in to avoid getting flagged, Tyrese booted up num3ra. He trained it using old test banks, open source code from university repositories, and most importantly, logic trees he built himself. The engine didn't just solve problems, it began to learn from the way Tyrese solved them. It adapted, it predicted, it started suggesting faster, more efficient routes to solutions that even he hadn't considered. And it was his. All his. But the praise still didn't come. When he hinted to Miss Cartwright that he'd made a math program, she rolled her eyes and said, "Sounds like something you copied off YouTube." When he offered to help a struggling classmate by using num3ra, the kid replied, "Nah, man, I don't need your geek shit." The more he tried, the more he realized this wasn't about intelligence. It was about who was allowed to be seen as smart. They didn't see a prodigy. They saw a black kid with rough shoes and a quiet stare. The only person who seemed to believe in his potential, Miss Delaney, hadn't returned. He Googled her name, found nothing. Weeks passed. num3ra grew smarter. Tyrese built a front-end interface that made it look like a sleek calculator, just in case someone stumbled on it. Behind the scenes, it was a growing, learning algorithm, capable of solving multivariable calculus, simulating probability models, and even breaking down errors by user type. Then, one afternoon, something changed. Tyrese was in the library, the only place where the air conditioning worked, finishing a quiet test run on num3ra. He had headphones in, trying to block out a loud group of seniors talking about prom, when the librarian called out his name. "Tyrese Calloway." He turned. "Principal wants to see you." Now, Tyrese froze. He hadn't done anything. No fights, no skipped classes. He'd even returned the overdue book on quantum logic last week. He packed up slowly, heart thudding. As he passed by the IT desk, he noticed something strange. The school's tech admin, Mr. Hanley, squinting at a screen. On it was an activity log. Lines of code. Tyrese blinked. It was his interface. num3ra had been flagged. When he reached the principal's office, the secretary didn't even smile. "In there," she said curtly, motioning to the door. Tyrese stepped inside. Principal Hellbridge sat behind his wide desk, fingers steepled. Next to him, to Tyrese's surprise, was Mr. Hanley, holding a printed packet of screenshots. "Sit down, Tyrese," the principal said, tone unreadable. Tyrese sat, his palms were slick with sweat. "Do you want to tell us what this is?" Hellbridge asked, pushing the papers across the desk. Tyrese glanced down. It was num3ra. The command lines, the logic flow, the AI functions he'd coded from scratch. "I built it," he said quietly. Hellbridge narrowed his eyes. "You built this?" "Yes, sir." Mr. Hanley leaned forward. "This is advanced machine learning, son. These are neural logic trees. This isn't from a high school kid. Where'd you copy this from?" "I didn't copy it," Tyrese said, firmer now. "It's mine. I wrote it." Hellbridge exchanged a look with Hanley. The disbelief was visible, like Tyrese had claimed he'd built a spaceship out of shoeboxes. "We need to confiscate your laptop," Hanley said. Tyrese froze. "Why?" "To examine the original source. If we find this was plagiarized, there will be consequences." "It's not stolen," Tyrese insisted. "It's mine." "Then you've got nothing to worry about," Hellbridge said. "You'll get it back." They didn't ask for permission. They called in security. They made him unlock his laptop. They took it, power cord and all. He watched it disappear down the hall like a part of him was being erased. That night, he sat in his room with empty hands. The space where Nomi M3RA had lived. Gone. The dull glow of his room felt colder, like his future had been paused. But something even more chilling was waiting for him. The next morning, as he opened his school email to check an assignment, a system message popped up. Security alert. Your device activity has been flagged for review due to unusual computational behavior. Further infractions may result in disciplinary action. What Tyrese didn't know yet was that Num3RA wasn't just flagged, it had been cloned by the IT department and sent to the district office without his consent. Tyrese stood in front of the flashing screen, the leak pulsing like a live wire in the center of the ballroom. His name had just been reinstated, the air still buzzing from applause, and now the entire internet could download the very code they once tried to steal from him. It wasn't coincidence. It was timed, just like everything else. Miss Park pulled him aside, her voice low and urgent. Ignore it. The judges already cleared your code. This is bait, meant to rattle you before the final. But if people believe I dumped my own code just for attention, they won't, she said firmly. And if they do, that's their weakness, not yours. Harper Baines, still seated in the back row, had already pulled out her laptop, typing with a fury. She glanced at Tyrese once, just once, and mouthed, "I've got you." He nodded, and with a breath that came from somewhere deeper than his lungs, he stepped back into the arena. The final round was nothing like the others. Gone were the isolated seats and private terminals. The competitors were now clustered in 3 groups, each at their own table beneath bright stage lights. Tyrese sat alone, at Station C. No teammates, no mentors, just him and Nguyen 3RA. The other 2 tables were filled with prep school all-stars, Eastbridge Academy, and Halston Tech Charter. Laptops glistened. Coaches watched from the wings. One team had an analytics engineer flown in from MIT. The moderator approached the podium. Final round begins now. You will receive 3 progressive challenges. Logic maze compression. Applied urban planning simulation. Abstract computational theory model. You have 75 minutes. Collaboration within teams is allowed. AI assist tools are allowed, but must show work breakdown. Good luck. The timer started. Tyrese cracked his knuckles and launched Nomni 3RA. The first problem flashed. A massive grid-based logic puzzle, with over 10,000 nodes, many interlinked and nested. A structure that would take hours manually. Tyrese whispered, "Map the full maze, prioritize efficiency, compress paths." Num3RA scanned it in 5 seconds, and began solving not just with brute force, but with logic optimization, cutting unnecessary routes, and suggesting human-readable paths. Station A struggled. Station B split tasks. Tyrese's screen showed green. Challenge 1, complete. He moved to the second. A real-time urban simulation loaded. Water lines, traffic patterns, budget constraints. The goal, reduce cost and increase access for a fictional city. Tyrese cracked his neck. None in 3RA. Simulate 5 model iterations. Optimize for equity first. The engine ran. Within moments, it had generated a scalable layout, cutting waste by 42%, increasing access by 61%. Station A flagged budget errors. Station B reran simulations twice. Tyrese hit submit. Challenge 2, complete. Sweat beaded at his temples. His hands shook, not from nerves, from fury sharpened into focus. The final challenge loaded, a theoretical abstraction model on symbolic entropy. It was brutal. Even Num3RA took a full 7 seconds before starting to parse it. The AI began plotting solutions visually, graphs on the screen bending and folding in real time. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Tyrese's hand hovered near the keyboard, making tiny corrections. Eliminate false positives. Cross-check assumptions. The screen pulsed once, then showed a clean green checkmark. Challenge 3, complete. He leaned back in his chair, heart hammering. Station A was still halfway through Challenge 2. Station B was crashing from a buggy model input. The timer buzzed. The audience, silent until now, erupted. Dozens of students cheered. Coaches stared. Even some of the rival competitors clapped slowly. Tyrese hadn't just competed, he had dominated. The judges tallied scores. A massive scoreboard blinked awake at the front of the stage. Names scrolled. First place, Tyrese Calloway, independent entry. Second, Eastbridge Academy. Third, Halston Tech Charter. Tyrese's jaw tightened. His fingers trembled. He had done it. He'd won. The moderator approached the center. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in congratulating the 2025 Kentucky State Math Champion Tyrese Calloway. Applause shook the ballroom. Ms. Park stood frozen, hands over her mouth. Harper Baines rose to her feet, capturing every frame. Tyrese stepped forward, the spotlight hot on his skin. A tournament official held out the trophy. Solid crystal, engraved, heavy. Tyrese grasped it with both hands and lifted it slowly. The room flashed in photographs and phone screens, and applause. And then, just as the noise peaked, a new kind of alert interrupted everything. A ping, then another. Dozens of phones buzzed. The projector screen behind Tyrese glitched, then shifted without warning. It displayed a subject line: leaked internal email. Louisville School District. Silence fell like a curtain. The email appeared in full. From Principal Halbridge to District Strategy Office. Subject: student profile, suppression. Tyrese Calloway. Student Calloway. If he proceeds with public competition, especially given the AI tool under his name, I recommend preemptive action. Disqualification is safest route. Cite academic integrity. Tool likely unverified. If necessary, manufacture conflict to avoid press issues. We cannot afford to let this case attract unnecessary attention to district disparities. The crowd gasped. A single word rippled across the room. What? Tyrese stood still. The trophy felt heavier now, not like victory, like a weapon suddenly too sharp to hold. Miss Park lunged toward the screen. Who posted this? A girl in the audience stood up. She wore a press lanyard. Anonymous leak, sent to 3 national outlets. Confirmed as real. Harper Baines was already typing. It's authentic, she said aloud. Digital signatures verified. This was planned. The moderator looked lost. The judges looked mortified. Tyrese stepped back from the mic. Slowly. The entire room was watching him. But he didn't speak. He didn't need to. The email had done it for him. This wasn't just sabotage. It wasn't just racism. It was premeditated erasure. And now the country would see it. Tyrese's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number flashed across his screen. You've humiliated the wrong people. Walk away, or next time, it won't just be code they come for. Tyrese Calloway stood in the eye of a storm he never asked to create, but one he refused to run from. The leaked email sat pinned to the top of trending searches nationwide. What had once been whispered in shadowed rooms, "He doesn't belong. His work must be stolen. Keep him quiet," was now displayed in bold fonts broadcasted across timelines, breaking news tickers, and headlines with words like systemic sabotage and educational betrayal. Principal Halbridge's name became a hashtag within hours. By morning, the Louisville Unified School District issued a formal statement. We have opened an internal investigation into the inappropriate email communications allegedly sent by Principal Halbridge. This conduct does not reflect the values of our district. But it was too late for damage control. Local newspapers picked it up. Then NPR, then CNN. Within 48 hours, Tyrese's story had gone viral. He was no longer some math kid with a calculator. He was a symbol of suppressed brilliance, institutional fear, and the lengths gatekeepers would go to keep the gate shut. Ms. Park handled media calls like a bodyguard with a degree. She fielded interviews, denied misleading quotes, and made one thing clear to every outlet. Tyrese didn't stumble into greatness. He had to outcode sabotage to reach the starting line. In response, the district scrambled. The school board called an emergency session. Members were photographed walking into the chamber, holding copies of the leaked email. 2 legal teams were brought in. The superintendent, a polished man who had never once met Tyrese, released a formal apology, but never addressed the boy by name. The board tried to buy time, but time wasn't theirs anymore. That Friday, dozens of local activists flooded the school grounds of Maple Ridge High. A protest formed out front, banners held high. Suppressing black brilliance is violence. We see you, Halbridge. Num 3RA. EL. Our future. Students, many of whom had never spoken to Tyrese before, began organizing classroom walkouts. Some posted copies of his code on hallway lockers, treating it like art. Others played videos of his math championship victory on school TV. Meanwhile, Halbridge disappeared. Officially, he was on administrative leave pending investigation. Unofficially, he was hiding from a spotlight he never imagined would turn toward him. Tyrese, for his part, remained silent. He didn't tweet. He didn't go live. He didn't post. He let the world talk for him. For once. But inside he wrestled with a deeper pain. It wasn't just betrayal. It was betrayal layered with years of being looked through. Not seen. Of being labeled bright, but lazy. Smart, but distracted. Difficult to motivate. All those labels made sense now. They hadn't seen him, because they chose not to. And now that he'd forced their attention, they wanted to reframe the story. On Monday morning, an email arrived from the district. Dear Mr. Calloway, in light of your recent accomplishments, we would be honored to invite you to speak at our upcoming district-wide Academic Excellence Symposium. We believe your story can inspire other students and represent the values we strive to uphold. Tyrese read it twice, then laughed. Bitter quiet. Mrs. Park raised an eyebrow. What's funny? They tried to erase me 2 weeks ago. Now they want me to inspire the next generation. She frowned. PR machines in overdrive. Letitia, overhearing from the kitchen, looked up from her second job's schedule. They want to put you in front of a camera so they don't have to put themselves in front of a courtroom. Tyrese leaned back in his chair. The lines between redemption and exploitation had never been blurrier. That afternoon, the school district posted a flyer for the symposium. It listed Tyrese Calloway as a keynote youth speaker. Without his consent, his inbox exploded. Students messaged him, confused. Journalists called to confirm. Some even congratulated him. He didn't respond to any of it. Instead, he made a different call. A week earlier, just before the championship, a podcast host named Malik Devon had reached out to Ms. Park. He ran a nationally syndicated show called Under the Surface, known for tackling injustice without pulling punches. Celebrities, whistleblowers, victims of institutional gaslighting. Now Tyrese finally returned the message. I'm in, he wrote. No PR. No filters. I want to tell the whole story. Malik replied in minutes. Say when. Tyrese stared at the calendar, then typed, I want it to drop the same day as the symposium. A beat later. Done. Let them gather in an auditorium. Let them dress up their shame in polished speeches and sanitized panel discussions. Let them speak of equity while hiding their emails behind legal teams. Meanwhile, he would be heard. He would speak into the mic, uninterrupted, and the country would listen. Raw. The night before recording, Ms. Park came over with takeout and a USB drive. What's that? Tyrese asked, eyeing the old silver stick. Your files, she said. The original napkins. The broken early versions. A timeline. I pulled them together just in case someone tries to rewrite history later. Tyrese blinked. You trust me with all this? She smiled. You built all this from the silence they forced you into. I'm just handing the echo back to you. They ate in quiet. Tyrese didn't sleep much that night. The podcast was recorded live from a studio in downtown Louisville. Malik Devon, charismatic and razor sharp, greeted Tyrese like a peer, not a novelty. Say what you need to say, he told him. Don't hold back. Tyrese didn't. He started from the beginning, from broken desks and invisible days. He spoke of scribbling formulas on napkins, of detention rooms and sabotage, of the morning his mother got that letter threatening their housing. He talked about Noom 3.0, the software built in silence, and the administrators who couldn't believe someone like him could create something real. He named names. He read lines from Halbridge's email aloud. He played the audio clip of Numi 3RA, explaining a problem, a clip that had once been mocked online, now heard by millions. When the podcast dropped the next day, it trended within 2 hours. Tyrese Calloway didn't just win, he survived. From suppressed to syndicated, Louisville teen's story shakes the nation. Num 3RA, the AI engine that the system tried to kill, back at the school auditorium. The symposium went forward, but half the students wore headphones during the opening ceremony. They weren't listening to the district. They were listening to Tyrese. At the end of the podcast, Malik turns to Tyrese with one final question. If you could say one thing to the people who tried to silence you, what would it be? Tyrese leans into the mic, stares ahead, and says, You silenced me so long. You forgot I could program a voice louder than yours. And in that moment, across the country, an alert pops up on educators' dashboards. Num3RA v2.0 is now live, free, open source, for underfunded schools only. It started with a retweet, then a share, a stitch, a TikTok duet. Within days of his podcast dropping, Tyrese Calloway's voice echoed through classrooms, cafeterias, coding clubs, and community centers across the country. His words, "I programmed a voice louder than yours," weren't just quotable. They became a call to arms. NEM3RA v2.0 spread like wildfire. He'd launched it in the dead of night, uploading the codebase to a secure minimalist site designed by a friend of Miss Park's. The terms were clear: free, for educational use, for the underfunded, for the overlooked. If you've ever been told you're not smart enough, this is yours. He didn't need a press release. Word of mouth carried more weight than press ever could. By morning, schools in Detroit, Newark, Baton Rouge, and Oakland had downloaded it. Students were installing it on lab computers held together by duct tape and borrowed faith. Teachers emailed Tyrese screenshots of kids using NEM3RA to solve problems they previously struggled with for weeks. One principal in rural Mississippi emailed him just 3 words: "You just changed everything." His inbox exploded. "I never thought coding was for me. Now I'm building my own modules. My teacher used your tool in class today and didn't even know it was made by a black teen. Now I know I'm not crazy. I'm just ahead." The most powerful messages weren't public. They were private, raw. Kids who had nearly dropped out. Kids who'd been tracked into remedial classes despite testing high. Kids who'd been told to stop trying to act white, just for loving math. Tyrese read each one. Every night. Every line. He printed the most powerful ones and taped them to his wall. NEM3RA had become more than a tool. It had become a rebellion. He didn't ask for a movement. But now he was in the middle of one. In the weeks that followed, local reporters set up shop on the front lawn of Maple Ridge High. The school, once quiet and overlooked, now found itself under national scrutiny. The district tried to paint itself as reformed. Hellbridge resigned for personal reasons. The board promised equity audits. But students didn't buy it. They held assemblies of their own. They called for curriculum changes. They used NEM3RA as proof that overlooked kids weren't failing. They were being failed. Miss Park, who'd returned to tutoring full-time, started a side initiative with Tyrese. Echo Labs, a virtual mentorship network where kids could learn to code, contribute to NEM3RA's ecosystem, and get real feedback from peers. The first meeting had 14 students. The second had. By the 4th week, over 300 kids had joined, from as far as Alaska, Florida, and even a boarding school in rural Maine. Tyrese held Zoom sessions, reviewed code, answered questions, and never once spoke like a teacher. He spoke like one of them, because fame followed, of course, but Tyrese kept it small. He turned down TV interviews, declined morning shows, ignored corporate invites. He didn't want a brand, he wanted a legacy. But fame, even earned, comes with shadow. One afternoon, while walking back from the public library with his laptop under one arm and a bag of McDonald's in the other, he got a call, unknown number, California area code. He let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, he received an email. Subject: "Let's talk. Private and confidential. Hi Tyrese. I represent Echelon Quantix, a next-gen AI company based in Palo Alto. We've been following your journey closely and are impressed by NEM3RA's architecture. We believe it has the potential to scale globally, with the right team behind it. We're offering $1 million for exclusive rights. This includes legal protection, platform support, and global rollout. The only condition: this project will be rebranded under our innovation arm, and you must step away from public involvement. We look forward to your response. Elena Karas, senior partner." He read it 3 times, each line heavier than the last. $1 million. More money than his family had ever seen. Enough to change everything.
But the price.
Silence. Erasure. With a smile. He walked to Miss Park's house that night, heart heavy. She opened the door and saw his face. "Talk to me." He handed her the letter. She read it in silence. When she finished, she looked at him carefully. "You thinking about taking it?" "I'd be lying if I said no," Tyrese admitted. "I could help Ma. I could build real infrastructure. We could start something real. But not under your name," she said. He nodded. "It wouldn't be yours anymore." He didn't speak.
Miss Park took a long breath. "They don't want your tool. They want your silence dressed up as a promotion."
Tyrese stared at the wall. "What if I'm not enough to carry it alone?" She leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Then don't carry it alone. But never hand it over just so they can pat themselves on the back while locking the next kid out." He left the letter on the kitchen table and walked home in silence. That night, he opened his laptop. logged into the open source hub, and typed a new header into the new M3RA roadmap. Next milestone: community governance. This movement isn't for sale. He posted it live. Within minutes, over 200 contributors had responded. But as he leaned back in his chair, a second email slid into his inbox. This time encrypted and marked urgent legal action pending. The email from Echelon Quantix didn't fade the way most offers do. It lingered, heavy and bright in Tyrese Calloway's inbox, a flashing temptation sitting beside homework reminders and interview requests he still hadn't opened. $1 million.
One signature.
One silence. He printed the contract the next morning at the public library. It came out warm, page by page, the smell of toner filling the air. 12 pages of legal language, so thick it felt like a trap disguised as an opportunity. He read every line twice. Non-disparagement clause. The signatory agrees not to publicly discuss, criticize, or reference systemic inequities or institutional practices related to education or innovation. Confidentiality. The signatory shall not discuss any previous controversies, accusations, or investigations connected to the development of new rebranding. NUM3R will be absorbed under Echelon Quantix's intellectual property portfolio, renamed Quant AI, effective immediately upon payment. Tyrese's throat went dry. They weren't buying his tool. They were buying his story. He stuffed the papers into his backpack and biked across town to Miss Park's garage, where she still ran her tutoring sessions between half-empty coffee cups and chalk dust air. When she saw the papers, she didn't ask how much. She only asked, "What's the catch?" Tyrese flipped to page 9. "Here." She scanned the clause, then closed the packet slowly. "This," she said, tapping the page, "is how they erase kids like you. They don't burn the bridge. They buy it." He looked at her, torn. "But Miss Park, $1 million. That's more than my mom's made in her life. It could pay off her debts, get us out of that apartment, build labs, scholarship."
Then what?
She interrupted softly. "You disappear from the conversation. They own the narrative. 5 years from now, some press release will call NUM3RA a product of their innovation wing. Your name will be a footnote, if it's mentioned at all." Tyrese stared at the concrete floor. What if that's the price of building something bigger? She walked to the whiteboard, where his equations from months ago still faintly lingered beneath layers of new chalk. Greatness that costs you your truth isn't greatness, Tyrese. It's currency for someone else's comfort. Her words hit harder than she intended. That night, Tyrese sat at his desk, under the flickering bulb. His mother had fallen asleep on the couch, the glow of the TV washing her face in faint blue. The contract lay open beside his keyboard. He opened a spreadsheet on his laptop. Pros on one side, cons on the other. Pros: stability for funding for Ecolab, global rollout for NUM. Cons: silence clause, no ownership, no truth. He stared at the columns until they blurred. For once, math failed him. So he turned to the only people who might have the answer, the ones NUM3RA was built for. He opened the group chat of Ecolabs and typed, "Got offered $1 million for NUM3RA. But I'd have to walk away from everything. Interviews, advocacy, even my story. Would you take it?" The replies poured in within seconds. At Kenya Flint, "They want your voice more than your code. Don't sell." At Darius St. Louis, "Man, if you sign, they'll say we only follow you for money. You're teaching us to build, not bow." And Maribel DC, "If they want to invest, fine. But you deserve to stay visible. We need your face attached to this." A Nova TX, "They've never paid any of us to stay loud. Why start now?" And then one message appeared from a student he'd never met. A kid from Tulsa who'd joined Ecolabs 2 days earlier. "A Zalen codes. They called me average. NUM3RA proved I wasn't. If you go quiet, the next kid like me won't even know to start." Tyrese stared at that one until his screen dimmed. He thought of the napkin that started it all, the one with ink smudges, and the ghost of a detention stamp. He thought of Ms. Delaney, the substitute teacher who'd once said, "Someone needs to see this." He thought of his mother's trembling voice reading the housing letter. He thought of every hallway whisper that said, "Not for kids like him." And he realized this wasn't a business decision. It was a moral one. The next morning he asked Miss Park to meet him at the small cafe near downtown, the one with the crooked blinds and the cheapest Wi-Fi. He brought the contract, folded neatly in an envelope. When she arrived, he slid it across the table. "I'm sending it back," he said. She didn't smile. She only nodded. "Then let's make it count." They drafted an email together. Professional, direct, impossible to twist. Subject, contract. Num3RI. Acquisition. Dear Ms. Carras, thank you for the offer. After careful consideration, I've decided not to proceed. Num3RA will remain open source and community driven. It was created for students without access, and that mission cannot coexist with exclusivity or silence. Tyrese Calloway. He attached a scanned copy of the unsigned contract and hit send. For a brief, breathless moment, it felt final. Then the reply came, 20 minutes later. Subject response required. Breach of confidentiality. Mr. Calloway, you are reminded that our prior communications included confidential materials. Your public disclosure of our offer constitutes a violation of negotiation confidentiality under Section 4B of the pre-agreement terms you accepted by clicking View Document. Our legal department will be in contact. Echelon Quantics Legal Affairs. Tyrese's stomach dropped. He hadn't shared anything publicly. Not a single word. But they were threatening him anyway. Weaponizing technicalities, trying to scare him back into silence. Miss Park read the email twice, jaw tightening. They're bluffing. What if they're not? Tyrese whispered. What if they drag me to court? We can afford that. She looked him dead in the eye. Then we fight in daylight. You built this in the open. They want the dark. He nodded, though fear still pulsed behind his ribs. That evening he logged onto the Ecolab server and made a public post. Title: The Cost of a Voice. A company offered to buy Noom 3RA and asked me to vanish. I said no. They're threatening legal action now. But understand this, Noom 3RA isn't mine to sell anymore. It belongs to everyone who ever thought they weren't enough. The post spread like lightning. Within hours, hashtags erupted.
Nem3R belongs to us, and let Reese speak.
Educators, students, even celebrities shared it. Tech journalists began investigating Echelon Quantics' history of acquiring and burying minority-created startups. By midnight, a digital petition had gathered 250,000 signatures demanding the company drop any legal threats. Tyrese didn't sleep. He kept refreshing the page, watching numbers climb like code, executing in real time. The next morning, an envelope arrived at Ms. Park's doorstep. Thick, crisp, embossed with the company's logo. Inside was a letter marked, Notice of Intent to Pursue Legal Remedies. At the bottom, printed in bold, failure to respond within 72 hours will result in formal litigation. Tyrese stared at the letter, pulse racing, then turned to Ms. Park and whispered, They couldn't buy my silence, so now they're going to try to bankrupt it. The letter hit like a hammer. Notice of Intent to Pursue Legal Remedies. The name Echelon Quantics stared up from the top of the envelope in crisp, unflinching font. Beneath it, pages outlined a claim that Tyrese Calloway had knowingly and willfully reverse-engineered proprietary algorithms developed by Echelon Quantics, alleging that Num3RI was at its core a derivative product illegally adapted from internal code frameworks previously viewed by Mr. Calloway under confidential pre-acquisition terms. Translation: They were accusing him of stealing his own work, and they had lawyers. Teams of them. Tyrese read it twice, then dropped it on the table like it had burned his skin. They want to bankrupt me. Miss Park picked up the document, eyes darting across the page. They're bluffing. They're using intimidation. Yeah, he whispered. But sometimes a bluff still costs you everything. Within a week, court papers were filed in Jefferson County. The case made headlines. Teen innovator faces lawsuit over ownership of breakthrough AI tool. David versus Tech Goliath. Num3RA heads to court. Tyrese couldn't afford a lawyer. Not a real one. No firm wanted to take on Echelon Quantics without a fat retainer or fame. So he did the only thing he knew how to do. Days turned into nights. He studied case law, copyright codes, public tech rulings. He memorized everything from Feist for to Rural to Google var Oracle. He filled notebooks with legal strategy, like they were math problems. Num3RA became his paralegal. He rewrote the engine to interpret legal text, flagging contradictions and simulating argument trees. By the time the first hearing came, he wasn't just prepared, he was The courtroom was sleek, wood-paneled, with a cold silence that seemed designed to smother anyone who didn't belong. Tyrese entered alone, dressed in a fitted blazer borrowed from Miss Park's neighbor, clutching a flash drive and a printed binder. Across the aisle sat the Echelon team, 5 attorneys in charcoal suits, flanked by a PR rep and an IT specialist. At the center sat Judge Lena Rollins, a firm-eyed woman who'd seen every kind of case but never one quite like this. She addressed Tyrese first. "Mr. Calloway, are you aware you're appearing pro se, without legal representation?" "Yes, Your Honor," he said steady. "I can't afford counsel. But I understand the allegations, and have prepared a full defense." She raised an eyebrow. "Very well. You may proceed." Tyrese rolled in a portable projector and connected it to his laptop. He dimmed the courtroom lights, took a long breath, and launched a slideshow titled Num3RA, Lineage, Architecture, and Authorship. Slide by slide he walked the court through the birth of his tool, from napkin sketches to GitHub commit logs, from timestamps to tutorial references. "This," he said, highlighting code in section 4.2, "was written at 2:00 a.m. on a public library Chromebook. This function didn't exist in any known machine learning frameworks. I built it because I couldn't afford pre-built libraries." He pointed to another. "This is a predictive logic tree I created for low bandwidth execution. Their claim that I reverse engineered their proprietary algorithm fails, because I never accessed their algorithm. I refused their NDA, and walked away before any technical demo." The judge leaned forward. "Are you saying you declined all formal briefings before their offer?" "Yes, Your Honor. I have emails to prove it." He pulled them up. Printed. Dated. Undeniable. Echelon's lead attorney, Mr. Delgrave, stood and began cross-examination. "Mr. Calloway," he said smoothly, "isn't it true that you corresponded with our acquisition lead and viewed summary documentation?" "Yes," Tyrese replied. "A marketing brief. No code. No technical specs." Delgrave smirked. "And yet you created a product with similar classification logic?" Tyrese smiled faintly. "Similar goals aren't theft. I didn't invent addition. But the way I teach it, that's mine." The room chuckled softly. Even Judge Rollins cracked a smirk. Then came the expert witnesses. Miss Park testified first, not as a tutor, but as an educator with 30+ years of teaching experience. She spoke of Tyrese's notebooks, his hours of solo coding, and his first attempts to solve systems of equations with logic loops. Next came a surprise. Harper Baines, the journalist. She brought receipts, a full timeline of her investigation, showing Echelon's pattern of targeting independent innovators from marginalized communities. She presented evidence that similar lawsuits had been filed, then settled quietly under NDA. "These aren't defensive claims," she told the judge. "They're strategic silencing." Finally, an MIT professor, Dr. Surya Milik, testified via Zoom. He had reviewed Num3RA's code voluntarily. "This is original," he said. "It's creative, efficient, clearly built without access to commercial-grade code. I teach AI architecture. I'd be proud if one of my grad students wrote this." Outside the courthouse, crowds grew. Students, educators, parents, coders, activists. They carried signs. "Let him build. Num3RA belongs to the people. You can't patent a voice." Some wore shirts with the original Num3RA interface printed on them. Others held up projectors showing the tool in real time, running simulations. Inside, the court recessed. Judge Rollins disappeared behind chambers. Tyrese sat quietly. No lawyers, no team, just belief. 37 minutes later, the courtroom doors opened again. Everyone rose. The judge spoke with clear, deliberate cadence. "In the matter of Echelon Quantix versus Tyrese Calloway, the court finds in favor of the defendant." A gasp. Then applause. She continued. "This court recognizes Num3RA as an original protected work. Furthermore, we recognize the essential role of intellectual freedom in underrepresented communities. Innovation cannot flourish where fear is policy." She turned to Tyrese. "Mr. Calloway, your voice and your code matter." Case dismissed. Outside, the crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged. Tyrese exited with Ms. Park beside him, the sunlight slicing across his face like a reward. Before they reached the parking lot, her phone buzzed. She looked down, blinked, then showed him the screen. It was a tweet, a protest. "Tyrese Calloway's brilliance, resilience, and integrity represent the best of our country. I'd like to meet this young man. My team will reach out." Tyrese froze. Not from fear, but from the weight of finally being seen. Park's smile faded slightly as another notification popped up. This one from Tyrese's school district's legal team. "While the case with Echelon is now resolved, Maple Ridge Unified will be pursuing internal review for breach of tech policy. Mr. Calloway's graduation status is under review. The West Wing smelled of polished floors and pressure. Tyrese Calloway, now 17, stood in a suit that wasn't borrowed, custom-coded slides loaded onto the tablet under his arm. He didn't come to take a photo with the president. He came with a proposal, a blueprint written not just in code, but in pain, persistence, and purpose. The Oval Office doors opened. Advisors stood back. President Ellison looked up from his desk with a warm nod. Mr. Calloway, I've heard quite a bit about you. Tyrese stepped forward. I'm not here for headlines, sir. I'm here to change the system that nearly erased me. And for the next 45 minutes, that's exactly what he did. His proposal was called ECHO, short for Educational Code for Human Opportunity. It outlined a nationwide initiative to equip underfunded public schools with accessible coding programs, peer-led mentorship networks, and open-source software like num3. But it wasn't just about access. It was about ownership. The heart of the proposal ensured that any tools created through the initiative would be community-governed and student-driven. No more selling innovation, born from struggle, to companies that had never set foot in classrooms with cracked ceilings. Tyrese's voice didn't tremble. He showed data, test scores from num3RA, adopters, dropout rates flipped, confidence levels rising. He played a clip of a 6th grader from Baltimore solving a logic puzzle, using code she learned through Echo Labs. Then he made his final point. We tell kids to dream, but we give them nothing to build those dreams with. Itch.io gives them more than computers. It gives them blueprints, for confidence, for survival, for greatness. President Ellison sat in silence, then stood and extended his hand. We'll back it, he said. Every line of code. 3 months later, ECHO passed as a federal education pilot program. Then it scaled. Schools in 34 states applied for the first rollout wave. num3R was integrated into public curriculum frameworks, under Tyrese's guidance. But Tyrese didn't stop there. He launched a nonprofit, num3RA Now, designed to empower youth coders in communities like the one that tried to silence him. He didn't rent an office in Silicon Valley. He rented a former rec center in Louisville and turned it into a tech hub. Kids who once skipped school now spent Saturdays debugging logic trees and mentoring each other through virtual builds. His social media became a classroom, not for attention, but for amplification. He featured student projects, held AMAs, and even dropped mini coding challenges that trended on TikTok. When national outlets tried to name him America's next tech mogul, he refused the title. I'm not here to be the next billionaire, he posted. I'm here so that genius stops being treated like an accident when it's black. A year passed. num3RA's user base hit 1 million. Echo Labs had chapters in over 60 school districts. Ms. Park, now retired, served as board chair. And then a letter arrived. It was embossed with the Maple Ridge Unified School District seal. Dear Mr. Calloway, in honor of your extraordinary achievements, we would like to name a hallway in our STEM building, after you, the Tyrese Calloway Innovation Wing. He stared at it for a moment, then set it aside. That night, he posted a message instead. I don't want my name on a hallway at the school that tried to erase me. I want to fund free boot camps for kids who don't even have hallways like that. Let's build from the ground up, where it actually matters. True to his word, he launched Project Firecode, a traveling boot camp initiative that partnered with underfunded districts to teach applied coding, logic, and tool building directly in communities. The first Firecode van pulled into Flint, Michigan. The second drove through Jackson, Mississippi. He didn't wait for permission. He drove the change himself. One afternoon, during a student showcase in New Orleans, a 14-year-old named Ava stood in front of a packed gymnasium and unveiled a nutrition algorithm she built on num3RA's framework. My family couldn't afford a dietitian, she explained, so I built one. The crowd rose. Tyrese clapped until his hands stung. That night, he sat at his desk, alone in the tech center he helped build, reflecting on how far silence had traveled once someone finally gave it a microphone. His inbox had over 4,000 unread messages. His nonprofit had just secured its first international pilot. num3RA would soon reach schools in South Africa, and yet it wasn't the headlines or partnerships that hit him hardest. It was the students, the DMs, the videos, the notes. One kid had sent him a drawing of a rocket labeled num3RA. Below it, in crooked handwriting, were the words, "You showed me I could be smart without asking for it." Another wrote, "They thought I was trouble, but I was just ahead. And yet, despite all the growth, the wins, the victories, the redemption, Tyrese never called himself finished, because he knew that systems don't collapse with one victory. They crack, slowly, loudly, persistently." Late one evening, he logged off his daily mentoring session. Echo Labs had grown so big, there were now moderators and digital classrooms running 24/7, but Tyrese still checked in himself. Before shutting down his laptop, he scrolled through the newest batch of messages. Most were updates, questions, snippets of code. But one unread stood out. It had no subject line, just a single message. "My name's Jamal. I built my own tool. Can I show you?" Therese stared at it. For a long moment, he didn't move.
Then, slowly, a smile crept onto his face.
He clicked reply. As the cursor blinked, Tyrese typed, "I've got time. Show me what you've built." Because the point was never just to build for himself. It was to make sure no genius ever sat silent again, no matter where they started, or who tried to shut them down. They didn't believe Tyrese could build brilliance, because of how he looked, where he came from, and what the system refused to see. But he didn't wait for validation. He created his own. If you've ever been doubted for simply being who you are, if you believe no genius should be buried by